After enduring betrayal from those closest to him, Hudson's perspective on the world could drastically shift. At the young age of 22, he faced betrayals from his fiancée, Mary, who abandoned him for her ex-boyfriend just 3 months before their wedding. She took off with the engagement ring and all the savings meant for their future celebration, leaving Hudson feeling disillusioned and hesitant to trust others, especially women. This experience led him to be overly critical of potential partners, causing him to prematurely end relationships before they even had a chance to develop. As time went on, Hudson gave up on the idea of finding love and resigned himself to being a bachelor forever. However, just as he made peace with his decision, Mary entered his life like a whirlwind of energy, with her laughter and a sprinkle of freckles on her radiant face. Mary and Hudson worked in the same office, but on different floors, occasionally sharing lunch with colleagues. Despite warnings that Hudson was a stereotypical introverted programmer who drank too much coffee, Mary had imagined someone completely different, a man with glasses, a grungy sweater, and messy hair. To her surprise, Hudson had curly brown hair and charming dimples on his cheeks. Mary was immediately smitten and didn't hold back from showing her interest. Their relationship progressed rapidly, catching Hudson off guard with how quickly he fell for Mary's charm. 3 years after they first met, the couple got married, and Hudson rediscovered his belief in the goodness of the world. 1 year later, Mary made an announcement that she had been promoted. This news filled the future father with immense happiness. 10 years had passed since then, and Hudson and Mary's son was now attending school. However, an uncomfortable feeling had developed between the husband and wife. It was as if one of them no longer belonged in the relationship. Despite this, both of them stubbornly pretended not to notice. It was a common occurrence when, after years of marriage, one suddenly realizes a loss of interest. The once fervent declarations of love for better or worse seemed distant, and they had become estranged from each other, like strangers. The dynamics had changed due to household responsibilities and aging. Hudson was particularly bothered by their age difference. When he was almost 30 and she was 20, it did not seem as daunting as it does now. Hudson had grown into a mature man with gray hair, while Mary, at 30, still remained an attractive young woman with a mischievous light in her eyes. "What are we going to do for your anniversary?" his wife asked one morning during their usual breakfast routine before heading to work. Reluctantly, Hudson replied, "I haven't thought about it yet. Maybe we'll go to a restaurant." His midlife crisis was in full swing, causing him to have little desire to celebrate his birthday. Carson suggested that we throw you a surprise party. "We'll take care of everything. You just have to show up." Mary smiled. The party was still 6 months away, and Carson agreed to his friend's suggestion. As the birthday approached, Mary stayed late at work, using the preparations as an excuse. She frequently exchanged text messages with someone on her phone. Remembering his previous failure in a serious relationship, Hudson couldn't help but wonder if Mary had someone else in her life, but was keeping it a secret so as not to offend his wife. However, he tried to chase those thoughts away from him, as they only made him more upset. The incident with the runaway bride from his past seemed to create an invisible barrier, preventing him from fully trusting in the relationship. Mary herself didn't understand how it had happened. Friend Carson had always been there for her, but she had never perceived him in a romantic way. Carson, an ordinary and unremarkable man, had never married in his 43 years and constantly joked that he didn't know the exact number of his children scattered around the world. This became a constant joke during their weekend gatherings, where they would all get together and indulge in alcohol. As they began to prepare for Hudson's birthday, Mary and Carson grew closer and began to see each other in a different light. Mary began to perceive her husband's friend as a more mature and respectable person. It turned out that he is well-read and intelligent. Sometimes their conversations about art and literature would linger so long that they forgot the reason for their meeting. The first time they bonded was during a car ride where they sipped takeout coffee and animatedly discussed award-nominated movies. Maria became so immersed in their connection that reality began to seem fictional to her. After these meetings with Carson, she would return home to her husband, and a wave of shame and disappointment would wash over her. She tried her best to make amends. Her husband noticed the changes in her behavior, but he didn't want to understand the reasons for them. Everything fell apart on Hudson's 40th birthday. He was having a surprise party with friends and coworkers in a rented apartment. The lights were off. Everyone took their seats. Mary stood next to Carson, who occasionally touched her arm. "Stop it. Everyone will notice," she whispered in his ear, not wanting to ruin her husband's special evening. "I can't just stand here with you," her lover smiled back. Finally, Hudson entered the apartment. The lights came on, and there was clapping and applause. Hudson wasn't sure if he was really happy about the whole thing, but he put a smile on his face so he wouldn't disappoint those around him. The last thing he wanted to do was hurt the people he cared about. In the midst of the celebration, Carson approached Hudson. He was already very drunk and could hardly stand on his feet. All evening, Maria watched Carson carefully to make sure that he did not say anything inappropriate in the presence of her husband. Suddenly, however, he disappeared, and what she feared most happened. While drunk, Carson confessed to Mary's husband about their intimacy, even professing his love, while exhaling the odor of alcohol on Hudson. Hudson looked at the drunken Carson with an indifferent expression and walked to the window, where he noticed his pack of cigarettes still lying on the windowsill. The devoted husband felt a mixture of disgust, pain, and anger. With an animal grin, he pounced on his friend, beating him savagely until they were separated. The onlookers looked on in bewilderment, waiting for an explanation from at least one of the men. It wasn't until they saw Maria, who was supposed to be by her husband's side, but instead was sitting with Carson and sobbing, that guests began to understand. Friends who were privy to the story of Hudson and his runaway bride were particularly shocked by the events that had just transpired. As for Hudson himself, he felt more devastated than he had ever felt before. He decided to file for divorce himself, as he could no longer be in the same space as Mary. On Monday morning, he prevented his unfaithful wife from returning to their home, leaving her belongings outside in shopping bags. Deep down, he knew it was wrong, especially since they had a child together and would eventually have to explain everything. However, he couldn't bring himself to live on the same property as Mary. The mere thought of it made him nauseous. Even before the divorce was official, Mary had already moved in with her lover. She tried to persuade her son to go with her, but surprisingly, he showed unprecedented resilience and preferred to stay with his father, for which he was immensely grateful. Facing another betrayal alone would have been too much for him. His son's unwavering support prevented him from losing hope. The lovers' first quarrel occurred after only a month of living together, and then Mary realized why he had never been married. In the midst of a heated argument, he turned into a true tyrant, resorting to threats and even physical violence in an attempt to gain the upper hand over Mary. She became frightened. It was a mistake she realized too late, and she had no way of getting back to her once beloved husband. Mary had to confront the looming problem alone while maintaining her sanity.